2020 was an intense year that confronted racism in America. Over 15 million people participated in protests sparked by George Floyd's killing, taking to the streets to let their voices be heard. Passionate chants and cardboard posters emphasizing the message, Black Lives Matter. I can recall closely watching coverage of the protests and reposting whatever I could via social media. As a young Black woman, I was conflicted on how to feel, what to do. Millions of thoughts were racing through my mind. New York City prides itself on being a diverse and accepting city. However, within the famed melting pot, hate crimes, racial discrimination, and school segregation run rampant. During the 2020 protests, I became interested in how racism is dealt with in schools. How are students supposed to deal with it? How do staff members respond to it? What's the NYC Department of Education's protocol for addressing racial discrimination within schools? My name is Bree Campbell, and you're listening to the Miseducation Podcast, Season 7, Questioning the Status Quo. This is Responding to Racism in Schools. I attend Frank Sinatra School of the Arts. It's a well-known art school in Queens with a competitive admissions process. Students who want to attend must audition for one of 6 studios: drama, film, fine arts, dance, instrumental, and vocal. I'm a film student. Though almost 2/3 of the student body identify as people of color, incidents of racial discrimination have occurred throughout my time at Sinatra. Needless to say, this affects the student life and school culture.
My name is Sophie. I'm a senior dance major.
My name is Anaya. I'm a senior dance major.
Anaya and Sophie are both active members of Frank Sinatra's Black Student Union. I sat down with them to discuss the racial dynamics in our school.
I was very wary when I came into the school, and I was very aware that the school is really racially divided in a sense. Within even my studio classes, and even in my academic classes, it was really no integration. It felt like it's like a fence. People just stay on different sides, and it's really strange. And I don't think it's gotten any better.
I think that the racial dynamic in this school is definitely one that is very, almost sneaky in a way. It's something that it takes a bit of time to see. I didn't really know what it was. When I saw racism happening, if it wasn't very blunt and somebody being called a slur, then I kind of couldn't put my finger on it. I knew that it didn't feel right, but I feel like there's a culture in the school where students are very easily able to get away with doing things.
It's not just students who contribute to the hostile racial dynamics that Sophie and Anaya describe. They were both in a class where their teacher made a racially insensitive comment.
To give it some context, we were watching a movie about Alvin Ailey, and basically it was about his life during the 70s, 80s. Somehow he ends up saying that, talking about his implicit bias, he says that if he were to see 4 white kids on the street, he would feel comfortable walking by them, but if he saw 4 black kids on the same block as him, he would cross the street. Which, implicit bias is something that's very important to acknowledge. However, when you have a classroom with black students, why do you think that it's okay to say that?
I hear this and I'm in shock.
I was right next to him when that happened, and when he said that, I laughed at her, I was uncomfortable, so I laughed, coping mechanism. And he said, I will never forget, he looked at me and he said, I'm serious, I'm being so serious. And I was like, whoa. it made the class very uncomfortable. Administration did nothing about that.
We did have a talk.
We had to, that's what yep, they did do something. We had to sit in a circle and talk, about our feelings.
After word of the incident reached school admin, they organized a circle conversation with the teacher and students. Circles like these are a key aspect of our school's restorative justice approach to discipline. However, Anaya, Sophie, and fellow students of color were not satisfied after this conversation.
I don't know, this school is so backwards in how they approach things in the school that, should it be approached, there should be a process to these things, and there should be a clear and cut,
After this many, instances, how do we not have some sort of plan?
Anaya brings up the important question of whether or not our school administration is prepared to address these kinds of incidents.
I feel like especially for the privileged students in the school.
They feel like holding hands and kumbayaing is gonna, fix every problem. It has fixed nothing.
I wanted to learn more about the restorative practices that my school uses.
I am a trained restorative justice practitioner, so I support building community throughout the school building.
This is Melissa Vargas, the class of 2024's guidance counselor. She also helped start Sinatra's first Latin student union as a Latina herself. I'm in her office. It's dimly lit, a calm environment.
So restorative practices usually involves a circle, so you would have all of the parties involved. We do introductions and a check-in to see kind of what the vibe in the room is. Then we use the talking piece to pass the piece along and kind of allow people to share their experience.
Restorative justice is basically a way to repair a community rather than punish and ostracize the culprit of an incident.
So I was just wondering, as a guidance counselor, how do you go about any acts of racial discrimination? Have you encountered that when it comes to having to counsel students or maybe student faculty issues, stuff like that? Can you describe that?
That happens far too often. And actually what I try to do is lean into those sorts of mediations as a restorative justice practitioner, which really boils down to creating a space for discussion, a quasi-controlled space, right, where people can speak their piece to try to iron out their differences. So if you can educate each other about our cultures and really recognize we're more similar than we are different, but also honoring our differences and celebrating our differences and knowing that there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't take away from your identity of who you are if you celebrate others. That's usually how I'm able to help people resolve those sorts of disagreements.
I wonder, what would be the ideal or perfect way to restore harm?
I would say there's no perfect formula, right? Because some people will be very set in their ways. Sometimes you maybe expect more from an adult or a staff member. We should have more access and awareness. So I try to sort of look at people as works in progress, meet you where you are, and assess what it is that you need in order to have a better understanding of how you've impacted the situation around race. All of this is rooted in indigenous practices, right? That we're all basically one large family. So we want to be able to always create an opportunity and a space for people to restore harm and find the way to re-engage in the school community, even if it's not exactly how it was before. Acknowledge that you may have caused harm, find the way to restore that harm, and then let's get back to business.
Look, it sounds great in theory. It'd be great if restorative practices worked in our school community. At the same time, I know a lot of students aren't the biggest fans of that type of accountability. My vice principal is another figure who spends a lot of time thinking about our school environment.
My name is Waniki Mwangi. I am currently an educator at Frank Sinatra School of the Arts High School, And my specific role here is assistant principal of arts and student experience.
Mr. Moniki wears a big smile as he leans back in his chair. We talk in his brightly lit and comfortably cluttered office.
I'm one of the people charged with thinking about students' experience from the time they walk in this building to the time they leave, both on a daily basis and through their 4 years. And so my first year here, which was last year, as an administrator, I was AP of Equity, Inclusion, and Student Experience. I have experience as a restorative practitioner, which is kind of connected to that idea, that framework of restorative justice.
Mr. Mwaniki explains that restorative practices can be tricky when it comes to teachers in light of school hierarchies. Students are meant to trust their teachers to educate them and not cause them harm.
From like an educator or adult standpoint, a part of my conversations always centers on, and it's our responsibility to make sure that students, whether or not we understand the complexities of the interaction or interactions or the experience, that they hear that we can take accountability. They hear that we can at least acknowledge there was an impact. Accountability is like what you're striving for, but at least there's like a basic, like you have to acknowledge the impact, acknowledge the harm.
After this interview, I emailed Mr. Mwaniki asking if he had any comments about Sophie and Anaya's lingering frustrations after the circle. He acknowledged that non-closure is a frequent reality in situations like these. Here are a couple excerpts of his response. While I understand and appreciate the potential reasons why students didn't feel a sense of closure or conclusion about the situation, I'm mainly left with questions about what could have been done to address those feelings. We can always improve, and the door is always open for students and other school stakeholders to share feedback that will help us grow and learn. Even though my school has a system of using restorative practices to address harm, like the circle, sometimes students decide not to take their complaints to the administration. Sophie again.
Sophomore year, there's like this whole thing blew up with social media and anonymous account posting, I forgot what the account was.
Black at Sinatra.
Black at Sinatra, a social media account with over 150 posts and 700 followers, has a bio that reads, "A safe space for the BIPOC community at Frank Sinatra School of the Arts to care for their stories." All posts serve as confessions, where students of color share anonymous stories about incidents of racial discrimination that they've encountered. When students didn't feel seen or heard by their administration during the pandemic, they didn't hesitate to use social media to their advantage. I was one of them. A classmate made an upsetting and racist joke to me in my freshman year. I was an emotional mess, confused and hurt because of what she said and wondering why she even said it. I was also unsure what to do about it. I was scared of going to administration and getting my peer in trouble, so I turned to social media to anonymously report the incident. The experience was cathartic and allowed me to mostly let it go in a sense. Though the Black at Sinatra Instagram page stopped posting in the fall of 2020, a brand new Instagram account that takes confessions from across NYC emerged in February of 2023. With only 18 posts, this Instagram page has gained over 600 followers. It's called Students While Black. I sat down with the student who runs the account. They preferred to remain anonymous.
I would describe it as a safe place to share your experiences and to both comfort other Black students and maybe even comfort yourself. Obviously, my heart aches for them, but I'm like, hey, that same thing happened to me. It's this shared experience. Obviously, it's a negative one, but it's this shared experience that a lot of Black kids in New York City face, is that we experience racism in the schools and we feel like we're the only ones. We feel like we're alone. And what I really wanted to do was connect everybody. I wanted to connect all the schools so people can really see this is a citywide issue of Black students being ostracized in their schools.
The page is meant to be a platform for student voice.
Honestly, I would tell the Black students that are not too comfortable with the idea of submitting that the voice that you have is one of the strongest things that you have. It's one of the strongest tools, and it can be a power and it can be a weapon. Use it as a power and use it to speak your truth and share your experiences, because you have no idea how much these submissions inspire other students.
Instagram accounts like Black at Sinatra and Students While Black are examples of students trying to call attention to and address harm in their own way. I wanted to hear what the New York City Department of Education expects from students and staff members when it comes to dealing with incidents of racial discrimination.
My name is Amalia Orman, first ever student voice manager. Not many school systems have this role, and this role was created via youth-adult partnership and youth activism.
Amalia informed me about various ways students can report incidents that go above and beyond a school's administration.
You know, you can report peer-to-peer, you can report incidents of adult to student harassment or discrimination or bias. You can use Respect for All. You can fill out the form because it'll go in two different directions. If it's peer-to-peer, it'll go to Respect for All. If it's adult to young person, it'll go to an office called the Office of Equal Opportunity, OEO. That office is usually adults filing reports against other adults, but it can also be used by students who have a complaint against an adult, and it will initiate an investigation.
When Amalia told me about the Office of Equal Opportunity, I was confused as to why I was hearing about it for the first time. I have a feeling that none of my friends are aware that it exists either. I then described the incident that Sophie and Anaya experienced to Amalia. Here's what she had to say.
I have some questions. Were there other restorative practices happening in the school beyond how they were used in that incident? Like, is the community familiar with restorative practices?
Yes. Frank Sinatra, the whole guidance suite and administration really prides itself on calling itself a restorative community. The guidance counselors who are part of the situation and attempted to be mediators call themselves restorative practitioners. So the school is very hyper aware of these restorative practices that are attempting to be utilized and done for good.
Do you feel like as a student, I hear you talking about like people say that this is really important to them, but do you feel like restorative practices are happening for real in your school community?
I don't think there's a real sense of consequence.
Yeah.
Because from my experience in interviewing people who have had harm done to them when it comes to racial discrimination and participating in these various restorative practices, there's not a sense of healing. There's not a sense of resolution for them. And they didn't necessarily feel like there was a set conclusion or there was a sense of, I don't want to say punishment, but there wasn't like a hard hitting teachable moment for this person to change. I know that's quite hard because you can't completely convince people to change, but a lot of people are just really unsatisfied with these, practices.
Yeah, I hear you. I think it's important to check in on whether needs are being met or not. And I think the transition between like punitive and restorative practices is a really tough transition, because I think maybe sometimes people feel like their needs would be met by a punitive response once a case is like investigated, right, by OEO or something like that. What are the potential like outcomes of an investigation? And I don't know what they are. And so I wonder like if learning about what those outcomes are would be helpful in articulating like what would it feel like to get my needs met as a young person, because I feel like you're talking about an individual teacher, but usually by the time I hear about an issue at a school, it's not really about an individual student or teacher, an individual comment. It's something that like it, to me, the feeling that I get is this is highlighting a culture thing.
Everyone is different. Every situation is different. There are no hard and fast rules for how to best respond to harm, and not everyone is going to be completely satisfied by the response. That said, students should be aware of the options that they have when a situation of racial discrimination occurs. After the interview, Amalia emailed me a long list of anti-bias curriculum resources and information about how to report incidents that take place at school. resources that many students may not be aware of. You can find links to these resources in the show notes. I'm encouraged to know that the Department of Education has policies for reporting incidents of racial discrimination. But what can be done to ensure that such incidents don't occur in the first place?
Student organizations and clubs like the Black Student Union, the Gay Straight Alliance, our Muslim Student Union.
Here's Mr. Mwaniki again, highlighting school organizations that are critical in creating a safe school community.
Those things are crucial to the overall work around race, equity, inclusion in this school, and that acknowledging we are still a work in progress and there's still a lot of work to be done.
Anaya and Sophie are involved in multiple groups that strive to help the Frank Sinatra community address racial prejudice.
Shout out to the Hate and Discrimination Prevention Committee.
What's the Hate and Discrimination Prevention Committee?
We've created to kind of give a space for students who have been victim or targets of discrimination to come report their problem with us, and we'll kind of help them through that process.
So not only do students have the option to go to administration, but in the case that they are uncomfortable speaking to staff members, they also have the option to come to peer leaders for support and mediation.
I love BSU. If you're in Frank Sinatra and you are a Black student, please come in and sit and talk.
It's very refreshing to walk into a room and see just Black people. I don't get that, usually throughout my week until I go home.
I feel like it's just, it's good to just come and relax. I feel relaxed mentally and socially.
Highlighting and supporting student-led groups within schools is very important when it comes to changing a school's climate. On top of that, students can report to the Office of Equal Opportunity if they feel dissatisfied with the way that their school administration handled a situation regarding discrimination from a teacher. Students can also report to Respect for All for situations regarding peer-to-peer discrimination. There's no magic bullet solution to centuries of racism, but ultimately, listening and allowing students to have a say in their school experience is vital, especially if they're experiencing any sort of discrimination. Student voices matter. Black student voices matter. This episode was reported by me, Bree Campbell, with production and editing support from Joey Fishground, Esther Alatishe, Sabrina Duquesne, Mira Gordon, and Taylor McGraw. Music from Blue Dot Sessions. Special thanks to Erica Wong and David Herman at Good Studio, as well as Hindenburg Systems. The Miseducation Podcast is a program of The Bell. Our work is made possible in part by the Pinkerton Foundation, the Summerfield Foundation, and FJC. You can learn more about our work and find all past episodes at bellvoices.org. If you're listening on a podcast app like Apple or Spotify, please drop us a quick rating and review. And don't forget to follow us at Miseducation Pod on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you for listening.